I know what it's like to be misunderstood, to have people think they know you when they've only seen the surface. When I walked the earth, people saw miracles, but they missed the message. They saw the teacher, but they missed the healer. They saw the prophet, but they missed the friend. And some of you are doing the same thing with your own soul. You see the symptoms, but you're missing the source. You're exhausted, anxious, numb, angry, and you think that's just life. But I'm looking deeper. I see the 5 small sins you've normalized. The ones you scroll past, the ones you laugh off, the ones you've woven into your daily routine so seamlessly that you'd be offended if someone called them sin. But I love you too much to let you keep destroying yourself in the name of keeping peace. See, you've been lied to about sin for years, maybe your whole life. You've been taught that the dangerous sins are the dramatic ones, the headline makers, adultery, murder, theft, the big, messy, obvious failures that shatter lives in ways everyone can see. And because of that teaching, you've developed a blind spot. You've learned to watch out for the wolves at the door while completely missing the termites in the walls. And those termites? They've been eating away at the foundation of your soul for so long that you don't even notice the damage anymore. I didn't spend most of my time on earth warning people about the big sins. Do you know why? Because people already knew those were wrong. They didn't need me to tell them that murder was bad or that stealing was destructive. What they needed, what you need, is someone to point out the sins that feel normal, the ones that feel productive, the ones that religious people defend, the ones that slowly, quietly, turn your heart to stone while you're still singing hymns and posting Bible verses and showing up to church every Sunday. This is the core pain I want to address today. You're doing everything right on the surface, but you feel spiritually dead on the inside. You're exhausted from performing. You're empty from pretending. You're confused about why you feel so distant from me when you've checked all the boxes, followed all the rules, done all the things you were told good Christians do. And the reason is this. You've been treating symptoms while ignoring the disease. You've been focused on behavior modification while your soul has been slowly suffocating under the weight of 5 sins you don't even recognize as sins. Here's what makes these 5 sins so dangerous. They masquerade as wisdom, as maturity, as boundaries, as self-preservation, as common sense. They're the sins you'd defend in an argument, the ones you'd justify to a friend, the ones you'd be genuinely offended if someone suggested you confess. And that's exactly why they're lethal, because the sin you can't see is the sin that controls you. The sin you defend is the sin that defines you. And the sin you call by another name, that's the sin that's destroying your soul right now, in this very moment, while you're listening to my voice. What I'm offering you today isn't a morality checklist. I'm not here to shame you into compliance or give you 10 more rules to follow. You're already drowning in rules. You're already exhausted from trying. What I'm offering is exposure, revelation, the kind of truth that sets you free not because it's comfortable, but because it's accurate. I'm going to name the 5 sins that are destroying your soul. I'm going to show you how they've been operating in your life, hiding in plain sight, wearing disguises you've learned to trust, and then I'm going to show you the way out. But here's the challenge. Once you see these sins clearly, you can't unsee them. Once you recognize the patterns, you can't pretend they're not there anymore. And that means you'll have a choice to make. You can defend what's killing you, or you can release it. You can protect the familiar prison, or you can walk into freedom. The question is, are you ready for that level of honesty? Because I'm not going to soften this. I'm not going to make it easy. I love you too much to leave you comfortable in your bondage. Let me start by telling you about a man I knew. This isn't some abstract parable or made-up story. This was a real person, with real struggles, a real reputation. He was religious, deeply religious. The kind of man who knew scripture better than most pastors do today. He could quote the law forward and backward. He fasted twice a week, not because anyone was watching, but because it was part of his spiritual discipline. He gave 10% of everything he earned, not just his income, but his spices, his garden herbs, every little thing that came into his possession. If there was a religious checklist for what it meant to be a faithful person, this man had perfected it. Every box was checked, every rule was followed, every expectation was exceeded. From the outside, he looked like the model believer. People respected him. They came to him for spiritual advice. They quoted him in conversations. They pointed to him as proof that faithfulness was possible, that discipline led to blessing, that doing things the right way produced the right kind of life. And he believed it too. He genuinely believed that his spiritual disciplines made him acceptable, valuable, worthy of my Father's attention. He'd built his entire identity on the foundation of his performance. But there was a problem. A deep, soul-corroding problem that he couldn't even name. See, this man had built his entire sense of worth on not being like other people, not like the sinners, not like the tax collectors who collaborated with Rome, not like the prostitutes who sold their bodies, not like the failures, the addicts, the broken people who couldn't seem to get their lives together. Every time he prayed, and he prayed often, he started the same way. He'd list all the sins he didn't commit. Thank you, God, that I'm not like them. Thank you that I'm not greedy. Thank you that I'm not an adulterer. Thank you that I'm not like that tax collector over there who can't even lift his eyes to heaven. He meant it as worship. He genuinely believed he was honoring my Father by acknowledging his own righteousness. But here's what I saw. Here's what broke my heart every time I watched him pray. This man was committing a sin he couldn't even name. A sin so woven into his identity that exposing it would feel like attacking his very existence. Every single day, he looked at broken people and felt superior. He saw their pain and called it justice. He heard their stories and thought, well, they deserved it. They made their choices. They're reaping what they sowed. And in his mind, that wasn't judgment. That was just truth-telling. That was just seeing reality clearly. But I watched his heart, and what I saw was a man whose soul was dying from the inside out, not because of what he did, but because of what he refused to feel. Compassion, mercy, shared humanity, the recognition that but for grace, he could have been standing in their shoes. He'd lost the ability to connect with people who struggled because he needed them to struggle. He needed them to fail so he could feel successful. He needed them to be lost so he could feel found. His entire sense of spiritual identity depended on maintaining a gap between himself and those other people. And the tragedy, the heartbreaking, soul-crushing tragedy, is that he never saw it coming. He went to his grave believing he'd lived a righteous life. He died thinking he'd pleased my Father. He never once suspected that the very thing he was most proud of, his spiritual superiority, his moral discipline, his ability to not be like those people, was the very thing that had turned his heart to stone. The small sin, spiritual comparison, the practice of finding your worth in the gap between you and someone else, the habit of looking at other people's failures and feeling secretly relieved that you're not them, and the soul death. He became the very thing he claimed to oppose: cold, judgmental, incapable of mercy. Separated from my heart in the most fundamental way possible, because I love those broken people he looked down on. I love them with the same intensity, the same passion, the same relentless pursuit that I love him. And every time he despised them, he was despising a part of my own heart. Now, you might be thinking, that's not me. I'm nothing like that man. I don't look down on people. I'm compassionate. I care about the broken. I serve at the soup kitchen. I give to the homeless. I would never judge someone the way he did. And if that's what you're thinking right now, in this very moment, I need you to hear something. That instinct to distance yourself from him, to immediately establish that you're different, that you're better than the man in the story. That instinct is the very sin I'm talking about, the very pattern I'm exposing. Because the moment you thought, I'm not like him, you proved my point. Let me tell you about another soul. A woman. Her sin was obvious to everyone, or so they thought. 5 marriages. 5 times she'd stood before witnesses and made vows, and 5 times those vows had shattered. And now she was living with a man she wasn't married to, in a relationship that was more about survival than love, more about avoiding loneliness than building something beautiful. She had a reputation, the kind of reputation that followed her like a shadow everywhere she went, that entered the room before she did, that colored every conversation and every interaction. People had opinions about her, strong opinions, judgments, assumptions. They knew her story, or at least they thought they did, and they'd already decided what kind of woman she was. She came to the well at noon, not in the cool of the morning when the other women gathered, talking and laughing and sharing their lives, not in the early hours when the work was easier and the community was present. She came at noon, in the heat of the day, when she knew she'd be alone, because she couldn't face them anymore, couldn't face the whispers and the sideways glances and the way conversations stopped when she approached, couldn't face the judgment in their eyes, the pity mixed with contempt, the way they treated her like a cautionary tale instead of a human being. So she rearranged her entire life just to avoid eye contact. That's what shame does. It makes you schedule your existence around other people's opinions. It makes you hide in the bright light of day because the darkness of their judgment is too heavy to carry. But here's what no one saw. Here's what all those people with their opinions and their judgments completely missed. Her real sin wasn't what she'd done in those relationships. It wasn't the marriages that failed or the man she was living with now. Those were symptoms, consequences, the visible wreckage of something much deeper. Her real sin, the one that was actually destroying her soul, was what she'd stopped believing about herself. See, after the first betrayal, and there had been a betrayal, I knew the whole story, even if no one else did. She told herself a story. I'm not enough. After the second relationship fell apart, the story got louder. I'm too much, too needy, too emotional, too demanding. After the third, the story became a belief system. I'm unlovable. There's something fundamentally wrong with me, something broken that can't be fixed. By the 4th marriage, she'd stopped hoping for love and started settling for attention. And by the 5th, she'd completely given up on the idea that she deserved anything good. She wasn't out there looking for love anymore. She was looking for someone who'd tolerate her long enough that she wouldn't have to be alone with her thoughts. Someone who'd distract her from the voices in her head that told her she was worthless, used up, beyond redemption. The small sin destroying her soul. Believing the lie that she was beyond redemption. Accepting the narrative that her past defined her future. Agreeing with the voice that said, once you've failed this many times, there's no coming back. And that belief became a self-fulfilling prophecy. She chose poorly because she believed she deserved poorly. She accepted scraps because she didn't think she was worth a feast. She stayed in situations that hurt her because deep down, she believed that hurt was all she'd ever know. When I met her at that well, I didn't shame her. I didn't list her failures or remind her of her reputation. I didn't give her the lecture everyone else had already given her 1,000 times. Instead, I offered her living water. I told her about a kind of life that bubbles up from within, that doesn't depend on external circumstances or other people's approval, that can't be taken away by betrayal or failure or past mistakes. I offered it to her not because she'd earned it, not because she'd cleaned up her act or proven herself worthy. I offered it because she'd forgotten or maybe never known that she was made to drink from something deeper than human approval, that her worth wasn't tied to her relationship status or her reputation or her ability to hold it all together. Her soul wasn't destroyed by her relationships. It was destroyed by the story she told herself about what those relationships meant. The narrative that said, you are what you've done. You are your worst moment. You are the sum total of your failures and nothing more. And that narrative, that internal agreement with shame, was the sin that was actually killing her. Not the external actions everyone could see and judge. The internal belief that she was beyond my reach, beyond my love, beyond the possibility of redemption. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about right now. You've been rehearsing the story of your unworthiness for so long that it's become your gospel. It's become the lens through which you see everything. Every compliment gets filtered through it. Every opportunity gets measured against it. Every relationship gets poisoned by it. You look in the mirror and see someone who's disqualified, someone who's used up, someone who's beyond the reach of grace. And that belief, more than anything you've actually done, is what's destroying your soul. But here's what I need you to hear. What if the real sin isn't what you did? What if the real sin is what you've decided you can never become? What if the lie you've been believing about yourself is the very thing keeping you from the freedom I died to give you? Now we go deeper. I've told you 2 stories to illustrate how these sins work, how they hide, how they destroy. But now I want to name them directly. These 5 sins look small because they've been normalized. They've been spiritualized. In some cases, they've even been celebrated as signs of maturity or wisdom or healthy boundaries. But make no mistake, they're lethal. They're killing your soul one day at a time, one choice at a time, one defended belief at a time. So let's name them. Let's drag them into the light where you can actually see them. The first sin is defended unforgiveness. The sin that feels like justice. You think you've moved on. You don't talk about it anymore. You don't cry about it in the middle of the night. You've processed it, prayed about it, given it to God, or at least that's what you tell yourself. But here's the test. Here's how you know whether you've actually released it. When that person's name comes up in conversation, what happens in your chest? Not in your words, not in the polite smile you put on your face, but in your chest, in your gut, in the place where your real feelings live. Do you feel peace? Or do you feel something else? A tightening, a flare of anger, a rush of vindication when you hear they're struggling, a secret satisfaction when you find out their life isn't going well. Unforgiveness doesn't always look like rage. That's what makes it so dangerous. Sometimes it looks like cold distance, calculated politeness, a boundary that's really a wall. You've convinced yourself that withholding forgiveness is wisdom, that keeping someone at arm's length is self-protection, that refusing to let them back into your life is a sign of healthy boundaries and self-respect. And in some cases, boundaries are absolutely necessary. I'm not talking about putting yourself back in harm's way or pretending abuse didn't happen. I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about the way you've held on to the offense itself, the way you replay the memory, the way you nurse the wound instead of letting it heal, the way you've taken the poison yourself and you're waiting for them to die. Here's the paradox that most people miss. You think forgiveness means letting them off the hook. You think it means saying what they did was okay, or that it didn't hurt, or that you're just going to pretend it never happened. But forgiveness isn't about them. It never was. Forgiveness is about you. It's about refusing to let what they did continue to control you. It's about releasing the weight you were never meant to carry. When you refuse to forgive, you're not punishing them. Most of the time, they've moved on. They're living their life, going about their day, completely unaware that you're still imprisoned by what happened. You're not punishing them by holding on to unforgiveness. You're imprisoning yourself. You're giving them free rent in your mind, allowing them to control your emotional weather years, sometimes decades, after they've moved on with their lives. The deeper truth is this. Unforgiveness is the sin that feels righteous because it's rooted in real pain. You were wronged. You were betrayed. You were abandoned, abused, dismissed, overlooked, lied to, cheated on. The hurt is real. The damage is real. I'm not minimizing that. I'm not asking you to pretend it didn't happen. But every time you replay that memory, every time you pull it out and examine it and rehearse all the ways you were wronged, you're rewounding yourself. You're opening up the injury all over again. And you're calling it remembering the lesson. You're calling it protecting yourself. You're calling it making sure it never happens again. But I never told you to build monuments to your pain. I never told you to set up camp at the site of your injury. I told you to release it, not because they deserve mercy, but because you deserve freedom. Over time, defended unforgiveness calcifies your heart. It's like plaque building up in an artery. At first, you don't notice it. At first, you can still feel, still connect, still trust. But year after year, offense after unforgiven offense, your heart gets harder. You become suspicious of love, cynical about people's motives, convinced that vulnerability is just weakness waiting to be exploited. You start viewing every relationship through the lens of potential betrayal. You hold back. You keep people at a distance. You never fully let anyone in because you're terrified of being hurt again. And the cruelest irony is this: you become incapable of receiving the very grace you claim to believe in. Because if you can't extend it, you can't truly accept it. The measure you use for others becomes the measure used for you. And if you're measuring out forgiveness in tiny, grudging portions to everyone else, you'll find yourself living under that same standard. And here's the part that will challenge you. The part that most people don't want to hear. What if the person you're refusing to forgive is yourself? What if you've been holding on to an offense against your own soul? What if you've been punishing yourself for years for something I already forgave the moment you asked? You keep dragging yourself back to your worst moment, your biggest failure, your most shameful secret. You keep reminding yourself that you don't deserve good things, that you're damaged goods, that if people really knew you, they'd walk away. And you call that humility. You call it staying grounded. You call it being realistic about your flaws. But I call it what it is: unforgiveness dressed up as self-awareness. And it's destroying you just as surely as unforgiveness towards someone else. The second sin is chronic anxiety disguised as responsibility. The sin that feels like care. This one is tricky because your anxiety feels productive. It feels like you're being a good parent when you lie awake at night worrying about your kids. It feels like you're being a responsible adult when you obsess over every possible thing that could go wrong. It feels like you're being prepared when you rehearse disaster scenarios in your mind. You call it thinking ahead. You call it being realistic. You call it not being naive. But I call it what it is: a lack of trust that I'm actually sovereign. A functional belief that your worry is more powerful than my promise. You're carrying tomorrow's problems today. You're rehearsing conversations that haven't happened yet. You're preparing for disasters that will never come. You're living through painful scenarios in your imagination over and over, trying to steel yourself, trying to plan for every contingency, trying to maintain the illusion of control. And you've convinced yourself that this is faithfulness, that worrying about your children is proof that you love them, that obsessing over your finances is proof that you're responsible, that catastrophizing about your health is proof that you're taking care of yourself. But here's the truth: I spoke plainly. The words that should have settled this issue 2,000 years ago but somehow get ignored or explained away or spiritualized into meaninglessness. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. I didn't say that because I'm naive about how hard life can be. I didn't say it because I don't understand that bills need to be paid and children need to be protected and real dangers exist in this world. I said it because anxiety is a form of worship. It's just not worship of me. It's worship of the false god of control. It's the belief that if you just worry hard enough, plan thoroughly enough, anticipate carefully enough, you can prevent bad things from happening. But you can't. You never could. And the energy you're pouring into anxiety is energy you could be using to actually live, to be present, to experience the grace I'm offering you in this moment. Here's the paradox. Anxiety feels like it's keeping you safe, but it's actually keeping you small. You're so busy managing hypothetical futures that you're missing the present grace I'm offering you right now. You're so focused on what might go wrong tomorrow that you can't see what's going right today. You're so obsessed with preventing pain that you're unable to experience joy, because joy requires presence. Joy requires the ability to be here, now, in this moment, receiving this breath, this provision, this small grace. And anxiety rips you out of the present and throws you into a future that doesn't exist yet and may never exist. The deeper truth is this: chronic anxiety is rebellion dressed as diligence. It says, God, I don't trust that you'll provide, so I'll white-knuckle my way through life, just in case you don't show up. It says, I know, you said you'd take care of me, but I'm going to have a backup plan, because I'm not sure you're reliable. And, the cruelest irony, your anxiety doesn't prevent bad things from happening. It doesn't. It just ensures you suffer them twice, once in your imagination, where you rehearse them over and over in vivid detail, and then again, in reality, if they actually occur. You're doubling your suffering and calling it preparation. Anxiety disconnects you from peace, which is one of my primary gifts to you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. That's not a suggestion. That's not a nice idea for people who have easy lives. That's a command for everyone, especially for people walking through difficulty. You become a functional atheist when you're controlled by anxiety. You pray with your lips while planning with your fears. You say you trust me while living as if everything depends on you. And over time, you lose the ability to rest. You lose the ability to trust. You lose the ability to receive. You become so accustomed to bracing for impact that you can't recognize blessing when it's standing right in front of you. What would change in your life if you truly believed that I am who I say I am? If you truly believed that I'm good, that I'm sovereign, that I see you, that I haven't forgotten you, that I'm working even when you can't see it? What would you do differently today if you trusted that tomorrow is in my hands? The third sin is unconfessed pride. The sin that feels like standards. This is the sin of the good people, the ones who have it together, the ones who would never gossip but they have strong discernment about people, the ones who would never judge but they can see through fake people instantly, the ones who love everyone except those who don't meet their definition of what love looks like. You've turned your spiritual maturity into a measuring stick, and you use that measuring stick every single day to evaluate everyone around you. You look at people who are struggling, and your first thought isn't compassion. It's distance. It's judgment. Well, I would never. That's what happens when you don't have discipline. If they'd just made better choices. I'm just being honest here, they brought this on themselves. You see someone fall, and instead of running to help them up, you step back and analyze how they fell. What did they do wrong? What pattern were they following? How can I make sure I never end up like that? And you call that wisdom. You call that learning from other people's mistakes. But what I see is something different. I see someone who's built an identity around not needing as much grace as those people. Someone who's turned their discipline into a pedestal and their consistency into a throne. And from that throne, you look down at the broken and call it truth-telling. You've turned your standards into a barrier between you and other people, between you and me. Every time you mentally categorize someone as less than, every time you inwardly roll your eyes at someone's struggle, every time you feel that little hit of superiority because you'd never do what they did, you're building a wall. And that wall might protect your ego, but it's suffocating your soul. Because I love the people you look down on. I love them with the same intensity, the same passion, the same relentless pursuit that I love you. And when you despise them, when you dismiss them, when you mentally write them off, you're despising a part of my heart. Here's the paradox. You think your standards are protecting you. You think they're keeping you safe from compromise, from mediocrity, from becoming like those people. But your standards have actually made you unteachable. They've made you unreachable. They've made you unable to receive correction without feeling personally attacked, because your identity is so wrapped up in being the one who has it together that any suggestion you might be wrong feels like an assault on your very existence. The deeper truth is this. Pride isn't thinking you're great. Pride is thinking you're better. It's finding your worth in the gap between you and other people. It's needing someone to be beneath you so you can feel above them. It's looking at someone's failure and feeling secretly relieved that at least you're not them. And every time you do that, every time you mentally position yourself above someone else, you're cutting yourself off from the very thing you need most: community, connection, the humility to say, I'm struggling too. I don't have it all figured out either. I need help, just like everyone else. Unconfessed pride makes you lonely. Desperately, achingly lonely. Because you can't connect deeply with people you're secretly judging. You can't be vulnerable with people you need to impress. You can't ask for help from people you've positioned yourself above. So you end up isolated, surrounded by people but truly known by none. Because you've never let anyone see the messy, struggling, still learning parts of you. You've kept those parts hidden because they don't match the image you've worked so hard to project. And over time, that isolation becomes its own kind of prison. You're dying for someone to really see you, to really know you, but you can't let them because that would mean admitting you're not who you've been pretending to be. What if the very thing you're most proud of is the thing keeping you from experiencing true intimacy with me? What if the image you've been protecting is the very barrier between your soul and mine? The fourth sin is passive obedience without love. The sin that feels like faithfulness. This one breaks my heart more than almost anything else. You've turned relationship into duty. You've taken the most beautiful, intimate, life-giving connection available to a human soul, and you've reduced it to a to-do list. You pray because you're supposed to, not because you want to talk to me, not because you're desperate to hear my voice, but because it's on your list of things good Christians do. You serve because it looks good, because people expect it, because if you don't, someone might notice and think less of you. You give because the church needs it, because tithing is the rule, because that's what you're supposed to do if you want to be blessed. But where's your heart in any of it? I told the Pharisees something that made them furious. I said, you honor me with your lips, but your hearts are far from me. You go through all the motions, you follow all the rules, you check all the boxes, but you're not actually with me. You're performing for me, and some of you are doing the exact same thing. You've perfected the performance of faith without ever falling in love with the person behind it. You know the rules, but you don't know me. You follow the commands, but you've never tasted the joy of true surrender. You do the things, but you've never understood why. And here's the worst part. You're exhausted, bone-tired, running on empty, because obedience without love is just religious slavery. It's checking boxes, meeting expectations, maintaining appearances, and inside, you're completely dry. You wonder why worship doesn't move you anymore, why the songs that used to make you cry now just feel like noise, why prayer feels like talking to the ceiling, why serving feels like one more obligation on an already crushing to-do list. And you think there's something wrong with you. You think maybe you're just not spiritual enough. Maybe you need to try harder. Maybe you need more discipline, more commitment, more consistency. But the problem isn't your effort. The problem is your heart. You're trying to maintain a relationship through performance, and it's killing you. Because that's not what I asked for. I didn't call you to be a servant, I called you to be a friend. I didn't demand obedience from robots. I invited love from free people. I didn't create you to check boxes. I created you for intimacy, for connection, for the kind of relationship where you run to me, not because you have to, but because you can't imagine running anywhere else. Here's the paradox. You think you're being faithful by showing up, by doing the things, by maintaining the routine. But faithfulness without relationship is just compliance. It's just going through the motions. And I didn't die so you could comply with a system. I died so you could come alive in a relationship. The difference between those two things is everything. One leads to burnout and bitterness. The other leads to joy and freedom and the kind of life that overflows from the inside out. When you obey out of obligation instead of love, you're actually insulting the very gift I gave you. You're treating me like a boss when I called you friend. You're treating me like a judge when I introduced myself as father. You're maintaining professional distance from the one who wants to know every detail of your life, every struggle, every fear, every secret joy. And in doing so, you've missed the entire point of everything I came to do. Passive obedience without love leads to burnout and bitterness. It's only a matter of time. Eventually, you'll resent me for requiring things you never wanted to give. You'll feel used, unappreciated, confused about why you don't feel close to me when you've done everything right. But the truth is, you never let me close. You kept me at arm's length. You maintained the relationship through duty instead of desire. And now you're wondering why you feel so distant. What if everything you're doing for me is actually keeping you from me? What if the performance is the very thing preventing the presence? What if I'm not looking for more service, I'm looking for your heart? The fifth sin is quiet despair. The sin that feels like realism. This is the sin no one talks about because it's the hardest one to admit. It's the slow, silent belief that nothing will ever really change. You've prayed for breakthrough, but nothing happened. You've asked for healing, but you're still sick. You've believed for restoration, but your relationships are still broken. You've hoped for provision, but you're still struggling financially. And somewhere along the way, somewhere in the gap between what you asked for and what you received, you stopped hoping. Not dramatically, not publicly, not in a way anyone would notice, just quietly, internally. You lowered your expectations. You made peace with disappointment. You told yourself, this is just how it is. You still go through the motions. You still show up to church. You still pray. Sort of. You still read your Bible sometimes. But inside, there's a resignation. A sense of, well, I tried. I believed. I did everything I was supposed to do and nothing changed. So I guess this is just my reality. You've stopped expecting miracles. Stopped believing your situation could actually transform. Stopped thinking that your story could have a plot twist. And you call it maturity. You call it being realistic. You call it having a grown-up faith that doesn't need fairy tales and happy endings. But I call it what it is. Unbelief. The quiet kind that's more dangerous than loud doubt because you can hide it behind a smile and spiritual language. Quiet despair is the sin that whispers God helps those who help themselves, which, by the way, I never said. It's the belief that you're on your own, that I've moved on to more important people with bigger platforms and more impressive testimonies, that your story is already written and there's no plot twist coming, that the best you can hope for is to just get through, survive, make it to the finish line without completely falling apart. Here's the paradox. You think realism is protecting you from further disappointment. You think lowering your expectations means you won't get hurt again, but it's actually sealing you inside a tomb of your own making. You're alive, but you're not living. You're breathing, but you're not hoping. You're surviving, but you're not thriving. And you've accepted that as normal. You've made peace with a half-life. The deeper truth is this. When you give up hope, you're not being humble. You're being proud. You're saying, I know better than God. What's possible for my life? You're saying I've seen enough to know how this ends and God can't surprise me anymore. You're putting a period where I'm writing a comma. You're calling the story finished when I'm still holding the pen. You're pronouncing yourself dead when I specialize in resurrection. Quiet despair is soul suicide without the act. It's resigning yourself to existence without expectation. You protect yourself from disappointment by refusing to want anything deeply. You guard your heart by refusing to hope for anything better. And in doing so, you cut yourself off from the very power that raised me from the dead. The same power that's available to you. The same power that can breathe life into dead situations, hope into impossible circumstances, restoration into relationships you thought were over forever. What if the thing you've given up on is the exact thing I'm about to resurrect? What if your premature resignation is the only thing standing between you and the breakthrough you've been waiting for? So now you see them. 5 sins you've been calling something else. 5 slow killers dressed as virtues. Defended unforgiveness that feels like justice. Chronic anxiety that feels like responsibility. Unconfessed pride that feels like standards. Passive obedience that feels like faithfulness. Quiet despair that feels like realism. They've been operating in your life for years, maybe decades, hiding in plain sight, wearing disguises. You've learned to trust. And the question now is, what are you going to do about it? Here's what I'm not asking you to do. I'm not asking you to try harder, to add 5 more items to your already overwhelming spiritual to-do list. That's not freedom. That's just a prettier version of the same prison you've been living in. What I'm inviting you into is something completely different. Something simpler. Something that will feel vulnerable and maybe even reckless, because you've learned to trust your defenses more than you trust my grace. But this is the only way back to life. Not more effort, not more rules, just honesty, just surrender, just the willingness to stop defending what's killing you. The first step is to name it out loud. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. You can't deal with what you keep hidden. You can't transform what you're still defending. So here's your first practice. And it's going to feel uncomfortable. Stop defending it. Stop calling unforgiveness boundaries. Stop calling anxiety responsibility. Stop calling pride standards. Stop calling empty obedience faithfulness. Stop calling despair realism. Stop hiding behind the nice names and call it what it is. Sin. The thing that's separating you from me. The thing that's destroying your soul. Find a quiet place. Close the door. Turn off your phone and speak it aloud, not to the room, not to yourself, to me. Say it out loud where you can hear your own voice speaking the truth you've been avoiding. I've been holding on to unforgiveness and calling it justice. I've been drowning in anxiety and calling it care. I've been proud and calling it discernment. I've been going through the motions without loving you. I've given up hope and called it maturity. Naming breaks the spell. It really does. The moment you stop defending your sin and start confessing it, you've cracked the door open for my light to flood in. The moment you stop calling it by its nice name and start calling it what it is, you've stepped out of agreement with the lie and into agreement with truth. And truth is what sets you free, not positive thinking, not trying harder. Truth, the sometimes painful, always liberating act of seeing reality clearly and speaking it honestly. The second step is to ask yourself the hard question. For each of these sins, you need to ask, what am I actually afraid will happen if I let this go? Because that's what's really keeping you trapped. Not lack of willpower, not lack of knowledge. Fear. The belief that your sin is actually protecting you from something worse. If you release unforgiveness, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid they'll win? That letting go means they get away with it. Are you afraid you'll be weak if you forgive? Are you afraid you'll be hurt again if you drop your guard? Name the fear. Look at it. Because that fear is what's really running your life. That fear is the chain keeping you imprisoned. If you release anxiety, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid everything will fall apart if you stop worrying? Are you afraid you're the only one holding things together? Are you afraid rest equals irresponsibility? That if you stop catastrophizing, you'll be blindsided by disaster? Name it. If you release pride, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid you'll lose your identity if you're not the one who has it together? Are you afraid you won't be special anymore if you admit you struggle too? Are you afraid you'll become like those people you've been looking down on? If you release empty obedience and start pursuing real relationship, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid I won't love you if you're honest about how you really feel? Are you afraid authenticity will disqualify you? Are you afraid that if you stop performing, you'll discover there's nothing underneath? If you release quiet despair and start hoping again, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid hope will hurt worse than resignation? Are you afraid expecting something good will only lead to deeper disappointment? Are you afraid I'll let you down again? Write down the fear. Look at it on paper. See it for what it is. And then hear me say this clearly, that fear is a liar, and I am the truth. The thing you're afraid of isn't what will happen if you release this sin. The thing you're afraid of is already happening because you're holding on to it. The third step is to practice the opposite posture. Not perfectly, not overnight, just practice. Take small steps in the opposite direction of your sin. For unforgiveness, write down the name of the person who hurt you. Then write this sentence: I release you to my justice, and I release myself to my peace. You don't have to feel it yet. You probably won't. That's okay. Forgiveness starts with a decision, not a feeling. You're choosing to release the weight. The feelings will follow eventually, but they don't have to come first. Just practice the posture of release. Say it out loud. I release you. I'm done carrying this. I'm done letting what you did control my present. For anxiety, when the spiral starts, and it will start, stop. Right in the middle of it. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat. Feel your breath. And say out loud, this moment, this breath, this grace, that's all I need right now. Bring yourself back to the present, because anxiety pulls you into hypothetical futures. Peace exists only in the now. This moment, this breath, the grace available right here. For pride, find one person you've mentally judged this week. You know who I'm talking about. The person whose struggle made you feel secretly superior. The person whose failure made you feel better about your own life. Do something small and kind for them, in secret, with no credit. No one has to know. Let it be an act of repentance. Not to them, but to me. A small step down from the throne you've been sitting on. For empty obedience, skip one should this week. One obligation you've been doing out of guilt, not love. One thing on your religious checklist that's been draining you instead of filling you. Skip it, and use that time to just sit with me. No agenda, no prayer list, no Bible study plan. Just sit, be present. See if you can remember what it's like to just be with me instead of performing for me. For quiet despair, write down one thing you've given up on. One area where you've resigned yourself to nothing will ever change. Then pray this dangerous prayer: Jesus, I don't know if I believe you can change this. I'm being honest. Hope has hurt me before and I'm scared to hope again. But I'm willing to be willing. I'm willing to hope again if you'll show me you're still writing my story. The fourth step is to find one person who knows your name. You can't do this alone. These sins thrive in secrecy, isolation, and self-reliance. They grow strongest in the dark. So you need light. You need witness. You need someone who can see you, really see you, and still choose to stay. Find one safe person. A friend who loves me. A counselor. A pastor. A mentor. Someone who's a little further down the road and has fought some of these same battles. And tell them what you're working through. Not for advice, not for fixing. Just for witness. I'm realizing I've been nursing unforgiveness for years. I'm drowning in anxiety and I don't know how to stop. I've been pretending to be okay, but I'm not. My faith has become just going through the motions. I've given up hope and I need help believing again. Let someone see you. Let someone pray for you. Let someone remind you on the days when you forget that you're not alone in this, that you're not the only one who struggles, that your struggle doesn't disqualify you, it just makes you human. The fifth step is the most important. Come back to the table I've prepared for you, not when you've gotten it all together, not when you've conquered all 5 sins and you're finally worthy. Now, just as you are, broken, struggling, still learning, still falling, still getting back up, come to the table, sit down, take the bread, drink the wine, and remember what they mean. Remember that I didn't wait for you to fix yourself before I gave my life for you. I didn't wait for you to be sinless before I called you mine. I didn't wait for you to get it all together before I invited you into relationship. I came to you in your mess. I met you at your well. I saw you in your worst moment and I said you're mine. You're loved. You're forgiven. You belong. The table is where transformation happens. Not through striving, but through receiving. Not through earning, but through remembering. You are loved. You are forgiven. You are mine. And every time you come back to the table broken, struggling, still carrying some of these sins you're trying to release, you're practicing resurrection. You're saying, I haven't arrived yet, but I'm not giving up. You're saying, I'm still learning what it means to be loved. You're saying, I trust that your grace is bigger than my failure. So here's my invitation. Not my demand, not my ultimatum, my invitation. Stop trying to fix yourself and start letting me love you. Stop defending the small sins that are killing you and start confessing them. Stop performing your faith and start living it. Stop earning your place at the table and start receiving the seat I've already prepared for you. If this resonated with you, if something shifted as you listened, if you recognized yourself in any of these 5 sins, I want you to do something. Leave a comment. Tell me which one you saw. Tell me which sin you've been defending, calling by another name, allowing to slowly destroy your soul. You don't have to share details if you don't want to. You don't have to tell your whole story. Just name it. Say it out loud in a public space where other people can see it. Let this be your first act of bringing it into the light.